After meeting her ex, Camilla Langford's perfect family dinner turned into a silent ambush. Her mother smiled sweetly, her ex-lover sat beside her husband, and together they slid a prenup across the table, forcing Gabriel Langford, the man who built their entire comfort, to sign away everything he'd ever earned. To them, he was just a lucky husband, a humble employee trying to keep a beautiful wife and a powerful family happy. But what none of them knew was that the company they all worked for, the empire that paid their bills, their cars, their status, already belonged to him. He looked at the signatures that would chain him, smiled faintly, and signed anyway. But why would a man agree to trap himself inside a contract designed to destroy him? And when they discover who truly owns everything, what will Gabriel Langford do that leaves them all shattered beyond repair? The late autumn light spilled through the tall glass windows of the Langford residence, washing the living room in soft amber hues. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint notes of her jasmine perfume as Camilla folded Gabriel's shirts into the leather suitcase lying open on their mahogany table. Outside, the faint hum of the city bled into the calm rhythm of domestic routine, the kind that made everything look flawless from a distance. "You always overpack, Gabe," she teased, brushing a lock of hair from her eyes. "You're gone 3 days, not 3 months. Gabriel smiled faintly, tightening the cuff of his crisp white shirt. "You know me. I hate being unprepared." His voice carried warmth, the steady tone of a man who had built everything he owned with quiet endurance. He had no idea the woman folding his clothes had already begun to measure his worth in signatures and conditions. She leaned closer, her hands resting on his shoulders. "Promise me you'll rest this time," she said, her tone soft, the kind of softness that made men trust. "No midnight emails, no calls with board members. You deserve peace, Gabriel." He turned to her, cupping her cheek, eyes steady and tender. "Peace is easy when I'm coming back home to you." For a moment, silence filled the space, heavy, almost cinematic. The warmth between them wasn't entirely fake. It was a practiced affection, the kind that had built a beautiful illusion. To Gabriel, it was love. To Camilla, it was control. On the mantel above the fireplace, family photos glowed under the golden light. 2 laughing children, a perfect Christmas card family. But even those smiles carried ghosts of lies buried under polished marble floors. The doorbell rang. Camilla's expression flickered, almost imperceptibly, before settling into a smile. "That must be Mom and Richard." Gabriel's brows furrowed slightly. "Richard?" "Yeah," she said quickly. "Richard Steele. You remember, my ex from grad school. He's now consulting for Mom's new marketing firm, and they thought it'd be nice to drop by before you leave. He's family now." Gabriel's chest tightened, not from jealousy but instinct, a faint unease that whispered of patterns too familiar. He'd seen it before, in his father's eyes the day his mother walked out for another man, leaving behind wedding rings and debts. He had sworn never to marry a woman who could make him question trust again, yet here he was, standing beside one. The door opened and Richard walked in, tall, confident, his tailored navy suit fitting like arrogance made flesh. Vivian Thorne, Camilla's mother, trailed behind, her diamond necklace gleaming like a trophy. "Gabriel," Richard greeted, extending his hand with that smirk only rivals wear. "Always good to finally meet the man who stole the one that got away." Camilla laughed too loudly. "Richard, behave." Gabriel shook his hand firmly, masking the flash of irritation. "Pleasure's mine." Vivian's voice cut in, sugar-coated but sharp. "Darling, before you leave, we should discuss something important. Just family business." Gabriel turned to Camilla, but she avoided his gaze, fidgeting with her bracelet. Vivian handed him a sleek folder. "A simple prenup. You know how unpredictable life can be, and after your last deal collapsed..." Gabriel's expression hardened slightly. "Prenup? Now? After 8 years of marriage?" Camilla interjected quickly, her tone sweet but rehearsed. "Babe, it's just a formality. Mom and Richard were only suggesting it for everyone's protection. You're doing great, but businesses can go up and down. This protects us both." "Us." That single word echoed like a mockery. He studied her face, the subtle shift in her eyes, the way her fingers trembled just enough to reveal guilt. He wanted to believe her. For years, kindness had been his armor. He had given her everything, trust, comfort, and a name built on love. And now they were turning his generosity into leverage. "Sure," he said finally, voice calm, measured. "If it makes you all comfortable, I'll sign." Camilla's shoulders eased in relief, or victory. Richard smiled faintly, and Vivian's eyes sparkled with silent triumph. Gabriel's mind, however, had already begun to map every detail, every expression, every whispered look between them. The man who once built empires quietly was now building something else, a memory archive of betrayal. As the evening dimmed and laughter echoed faintly over dinner, Gabriel knew something had changed. He didn't show it, but beneath his calm face, something ancient stirred. The same quiet storm that had made his father's enemies fear him decades ago. He looked at Camilla and whispered gently, "I'll sign it first thing in the morning." Camilla smiled, leaning in to kiss him goodnight, whispering words that used to mean love. But when she turned away, his eyes lingered, not on her, but on Richard's reflection in the glass door, smirking as if he had already won. Gabriel knew that smirk, and this time he would not be the fool. The sky outside dimmed into a bruised violet as Gabriel Langford adjusted his cufflinks one last time, standing by the doorway with his suitcase. The children had hugged him goodbye an hour earlier, their laughter still echoing faintly through the hallway. Camilla stood at the bottom of the staircase, smiling like the perfect wife from a magazine cover. Elegant in a silk blouse, hair cascading neatly over her shoulders, her perfume light and distracting. "Drive safe, baby," she said softly, walking toward him. "Text me when you get to the airport, okay?" He leaned down, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered, "Always." She smiled, watching him leave through the glass door. The soft thud of the closing door marked the rhythm of a marriage that looked too perfect to question. Gabriel walked down the stone steps, loaded his luggage into the black sedan, and waved once more before the car pulled away from the driveway. Inside the house, Camilla lingered at the window, her expression briefly shifting from warm to restless. Her phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. Richard Steele. Her fingers trembled with excitement as she typed quickly, her lips curling slightly into a grin. 30 minutes into the drive, as the sedan glided through the freeway, Gabriel leaned back in his seat, scrolling through his phone. The city lights blurred past the tinted glass. A notification appeared. Camilla sent a message. He smiled faintly. She always sent him a sweet note before takeoff. He opened it and froze. The screen glowed with images. Camilla, draped in red lingerie, lying on their bed, her lips parted, her gaze dangerously inviting. One photo after another, each more intimate, more deliberate. Below the pictures was a message that shattered the illusion of his entire marriage. "He's left now. You can come over. He'll be back in 2 days. I missed every part of you. As you can see, my body is already on fire for you." For a moment he couldn't breathe. The world around him fell silent, like sound had been sucked out of existence. The driver's voice echoed faintly from the front seat. Something about the route, traffic, weather, but Gabriel didn't hear a word. His thumb trembled as he took screenshots, each one carefully saved, one after another. 2 minutes later, the message vanished, deleted. Then his phone rang. "Babe," Camilla's voice came through, sounding casual, almost innocent. "Are you at the airport now? I mistakenly sent a client's confidential file to you. It's not important, but I already deleted it in case you see a deleted message. Just ignore it, okay?" Gabriel's throat tightened. His voice came out calm, almost detached. "I haven't checked my chat yet, sweetheart. I'll look later." "Oh, good," she said, exhaling in relief. "Don't bother. Just focus on your flight. Love you." He smiled faintly into the phone. "Love you too." Then he ended the call. His jaw tightened. The driver looked at him through the rear mirror. "Sir, everything all right?" Gabriel's voice was steady, too steady. "Turn around." "Sir? Take me back home. Don't use the main road. Go around to the next street, 2 houses before mine. Park where I can see the front door." The driver hesitated, then obeyed. The car made a slow U-turn, the sound of the tires blending with the low hum of the city night. By the time they reached his neighborhood, The lights in his house were on. Laughter spilled faintly through the windows. He lowered the car window halfway, his gaze fixed on the driveway. 30 minutes later, a silver Mercedes pulled up outside his gate. Richard stepped out. Casual this time. No suit, just a black shirt hugging his chest. He looked both confident and careless, like a man entering a home that wasn't his for the first time, but felt like it belonged to him. Camilla appeared at the door wearing the same red lingerie from the photos. She didn't even pretend to be cautious. Her smile was radiant, filled with a hunger that had nothing to do with love. She threw her arms around him. They kissed passionately in full view of the quiet suburban street, unaware of the eyes watching from a car in the shadows. Richard's hand slid around her waist as she pulled him inside. The front door remained slightly open. Lights glowed down the hallway, silhouettes moving against the curtain. Gabriel's chest rose and fell slowly. He didn't blink. He didn't rage. He only watched, memorizing every second, every gesture, every careless betrayal. Then as the front lights dimmed, he leaned forward and whispered under his breath, "Enjoy your evening, Camilla. It's your last." Inside the house, the laughter grew faint. Upstairs, their phones went dark. Gabriel sat in the silence, every part of him cold, deliberate, calculating. There was no shouting, no confrontation, only the quiet birth of vengeance. The kind of vengeance that doesn't scream, the kind that studies every move, every weakness, every sin, and waits for the perfect moment to destroy it all. And that moment had just begun. The night deepened, but Gabriel Langford didn't move. The car engine was off, the air thick with the faint scent of leather and cold betrayal. The house before him stood glowing in fragments of soft yellow light, shadows shifting occasionally behind the curtains. Somewhere inside, his wife, his supposed partner of 8 years, was in the arms of another man. Her laughter, once a melody of love, now struck him like slow venom seeping through the veins. He sat there motionless, fingers pressed against his jaw, eyes fixed on the reflection of his own face in the windshield. There was no anger in his gaze, just a haunting stillness, the kind of silence that comes before a hurricane. He could hear faint echoes of a man he once was, kind, trusting, blind in love. That man was dead now, buried beneath the first glimpse of truth. As he waited, his mind began to rewind through years, peeling back the layers of deception he'd called a marriage. Every smile, every apology, every kiss now replayed as staged performances in a long, cruel act. And beneath it all, a deeper ache surfaced. Old ghosts he had buried long ago, now clawing their way back to life. He remembered being 12, standing in the hallway of his parents' home, watching his mother sob on the kitchen floor while his father screamed about betrayal. His father had discovered she'd been pregnant with another man's child. Their neighbor, a wealthy contractor who promised her a better life. Gabriel had watched his father crumble, pride stripped, dignity gone. The man had worked 2 decades building a construction company from scratch, only to drink himself into silence a year later. Gabriel never forgot the way his mother packed her bags and left without looking back. That night, he swore to himself that when he became a man, no one would ever have the power to break him like that. But life has a way of mocking vows. He had met Camilla years later during a charity gala. She'd seemed nothing like his mother, soft-spoken, graceful, grounded. He'd been instantly drawn to her light. He believed she represented everything he'd searched for: peace, stability, love without calculation. But now, watching her move in the dim light of their bedroom through the window, he realized she wasn't his redemption. She was his lesson. He remembered the subtle signs, her sudden distance, the new perfume, the way she smiled too easily at her phone, claiming it was work emails, the family dinners with her mother's smirks and manipulative questions, the night she told him she needed space to think. He had dismissed it all, thinking love meant patience. He had been patient while they mocked him behind smiles. His mind flicked to his college years, his first love, Nora, the woman who said she couldn't live without him, yet left him for his roommate when he went broke after losing a startup investment. It was the same story his father lived, only the faces changed. He had forgiven her, the way good men do, and told himself that kindness was a shield. But kindness, he realized tonight, was just permission for the wicked to sharpen their knives. He could almost hear his father's voice, hoarse, heavy with whiskey, whispering the night before he died. If you ever meet a woman who loves your peace but not your pain, son, run. Because when she learns where your heart keeps its softness, that's where she'll stab. Gabriel exhaled slowly. He finally understood. He opened his phone and replayed the last few seconds of the deleted message. He'd saved it in cloud backup, just as he did with every important file. He had built empires by anticipating human weakness, and tonight, he realized his wife's weakness was the very thing she thought made her powerful. Her beauty, her arrogance, her belief that he was blind. His heart no longer raced. It slowed into precision. He was no longer the husband waiting for an apology. He was the strategist mapping the battlefield. The betrayal was no longer emotional, it was intellectual, and that made him dangerous. He thought of his mentor, Jonathan Reed, the billionaire who once told him, "In business, Gabriel, revenge is never rage. It's restructuring." He smiled faintly at that thought. Inside, he saw the faint flicker of the hallway light turn off. Silence. He knew what that meant. They were in the bedroom now. His bedroom. The one he built, the one he paid for. He imagined them switching off their phones to avoid disturbance, sealing their little world of deceit. He didn't need to see the rest. The image in his mind was enough to haunt him into focus. He turned to his driver. "Go home. I'll walk from here." The driver hesitated. "Sir, are you sure?" "Yes," Gabriel said quietly. "And don't mention tonight to anyone. Not a word." The man nodded and drove away, leaving Gabriel standing under the pale glow of the streetlight. He slipped his hands into his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the house one last time. Behind those walls lay every betrayal he had ever suffered, concentrated into one woman, one night. But what they didn't know was that Gabriel Langford didn't lose things. He simply waited for the right time to collect them. And as the wind brushed through the trees, he whispered softly to the quiet street, "She broke the man. Now she'll meet the mind." That was the night Gabriel Langford buried his mercy forever. The morning after that long, sleepless night, the Langford mansion stood quiet beneath a pale wash of dawn. Gabriel sat alone in his study, the same room where he'd once drawn blueprints for his first company, a company he later folded into the vast conglomerate that now quietly bore his name. The same company that paid the salaries of everyone who thought they owned him. His phone screen glowed faintly on the desk. He had replayed Camilla's deleted message twice before sunrise, not out of disbelief anymore, but calculation. Every detail, the timestamp, the location metadata, the tone, was evidence, not for confrontation, but for war. The house was silent. She was still asleep upstairs, perhaps curled in silk sheets that still carried the scent of her lover. For years, he had built his empire under the illusion of humility. He wore no designer logos, drove no flashy cars, lived beneath the radar of the very elites who once mocked him. But today, that quiet armor was peeling away. Today, the predator inside the gentleman stirred awake. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Damien Cross," a voice answered, low and steady. "You sound different, Gabe." "Because I am," he replied. "Meet me at the office. No assistants, no records." 2 hours later, in a private corner office overlooking the Boston skyline, Damien stepped in, his navy suit crisp, his eyes narrowing at the look on Gabriel's face. "I know that look. You're not here for business. What happened?" Gabriel slid his phone across the table. "Play the recording." Damien listened, his expression darkening with every passing second. When the final line of Camilla's text appeared, "He's gone now. Come over." He exhaled slowly and set the phone down. "Jesus, Gabe, that's exactly what I needed," Gabriel cut in quietly. "We're not reacting. We're restructuring." Damien leaned back, studying him. "You don't want a divorce?" Gabriel smiled faintly. "Divorce is for the wounded. I'm not wounded, Damien. I'm awake." He stood walking toward the glass window where the city sprawled beneath them. "They forced me to sign a prenup yesterday. Her, her mother, her ex, all sitting together in my home, smiling like predators. They think they outsmarted me, but every clause in that contract ties to a company they think belongs to someone else. My lawyers drafted that prenup 2 years ago, Damien. I knew this day would come. Damien's eyebrows lifted. You predated a counter-contract? Not exactly, Gabriel said. I hid the ownership structure through 12 shell companies. Every share they think belongs to a trust in my late father's name is actually mine. I control every account, every holding, every intellectual property right. When the time comes, I'll flip one document and the entire empire shifts back into my hand. Damien couldn't help but smirk. And she has no idea. She thinks I'm still a salaried partner, Gabriel said. They all do. He turned, eyes calm but burning. This isn't about catching her in bed, Damien. That's too small. I want them destroyed in the language they worship. Money, reputation, and legacy. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Then Damien nodded. All right, where do we start? Gabriel sat again, leaning forward. First, we gather silence. No accusations, no arguments. She must believe she's safe. I'll leave on another business trip in 2 weeks. This time, she'll believe she's free. While she's busy destroying what's left of our marriage, I'll be freezing her world from the inside. Bank accounts, property titles, her mother's firm, all under my shadow. I want their security to vanish before they even notice it's missing. Damien scribbled notes, his lawyer's precision sharp. What about the children? Gabriel's jaw tightened. We'll get DNA confirmation discreetly. If they're mine, I'll protect them. If not, he stopped mid-sentence, his eyes shifting toward the skyline again. Then they'll learn who their real father is, in court. The plan was ruthless, surgical. Over the next hour, they mapped the first 4 layers of Gabriel's revenge. Anonymous reports to the SEC about Richard's insider trades. Quiet audits of Vivian Thorne's luxury firm, funded secretly by Gabriel years ago. A forensic team hired under a fake name to trace Camilla's digital footprint and confirm her affair beyond question. By noon, Damien closed the folder and said softly, "This isn't revenge anymore, Gabe. It's a purge." Gabriel looked up, eyes unblinking. Good. He walked to his private safe, pressed his thumb against the scanner, and withdrew a sealed envelope. Inside were original corporate registration documents, each stamped years ago, each proving his full ownership. He slid them across the table. When I sign these, he said quietly, the world will see who they've been sleeping with. Their boss. Damien chuckled, almost in disbelief. You've been planning this longer than I thought. Gabriel's voice was low, deliberate. My father trusted love. I trust patterns. Camilla fits them all. As he stood to leave, the sunlight caught his reflection on the glass. A man once broken by love, now redefined by purpose. Outside, the wind shifted, sweeping through the city like a quiet omen. By the time he stepped out of the building, the day looked ordinary to everyone else. But to Gabriel Langford, it was the first day of dismantling an empire built on lies. And the cruelest part? None of them even knew the storm had already begun. Gabriel's orchestra began with whispers and paperwork instead of drums and trumpets. For 2 days, he moved like a ghost inside his own life, present enough to avoid suspicion, distant enough to let the others feel their victory. He flew to Atlanta for a board meeting everyone assumed would keep him away for a week. Instead, he slipped back into town after 48 hours, letting the rumor of his absence spread like warm light through the family's social circle. Camilla posted smiling photos. Vivian announced a brunch partnership with a new client. Richard boasted about a pending fund. Small celebrations that, to Gabriel, looked like the last cocky breaths before a collapse. Damien ran the legal side like a surgeon. He filed quiet subpoenas through shell entities, ordered forensic accountants to comb personal and corporate ledgers, and opened discreet lines with 2 federal investigators he'd once helped in an unrelated white-collar case. They were professionals who answered only to paperwork and bank transfers. Their first assignment: follow every dollar tied to Vivian Thorne and Co., the boutique marketing firm that had fed Camilla's lifestyle and Richard's vanity. Gabriel had seeded capital there under a different name years ago. He wanted the audit to pick up small, incriminating irregularities that would later explode into embezzlement and tax fraud accusations. At home, life kept its carefully arranged choreography. Mornings smelled of coffee and the kids' cereal. Camilla's laughter floated down the stairs when she practiced speech lines for a charity gala. And Richard's voice, full of competitive charm, carried when he coached their son's soccer drills. The children were blithe and opaque, two bright orbs who believed their world was simple. A father who loved them, a mother who dazzled, a man who taught them to kick straight. Gabriel watched them from a measured distance, sitting through breakfast with an actor's patience. He held the partnership of 1,000 memories like a ledger, entries of kindness, deposits of trust, then turned each page only to catalog what he would need to prove in court. He started with reputation. Damien leaked a carefully worded tip to a tenacious financial reporter about a possible SEC inquiry into Richard Steele's fund, just enough to get a journalist to call. The reporter's curiosity was the perfect lever. It forced Richard to micromanage his emails, to double guard his calls, and to make a panicked investment that left small, traceable breadcrumbs. Gabriel didn't want immediate exposure. He wanted Richard to act like a man who had something to hide. Next came the freeze. Under a corporate shell, Gabriel controlled. Damien filed motions to put temporary holds on a set of trust accounts tied nominally to Camilla's name, citing irregular transfers flagged by auditors. The bank complied within 48 hours. Protocol and fear of regulatory entanglement made them obedient. Cards that paid for designer dresses and private tuition suddenly hiccuped at checkout. Camilla's assistant called to say a vendor's wire hadn't gone through. Vivian's calls to explain a clerical error sounded hollow. Gabriel watched the micro collapse with a clinical calm that would have worried anyone who loved him. He sent a bouquet of white lilies to the house that afternoon with a note, "Thinking of you." Kindness, he had learned, often disarmed suspicion. Camilla posted the photo on her social feed with the caption, "My rock." The image spread among friends and donors, proof to their world that nothing had changed. Inside, however, her private messages were fracturing. Damien had already intercepted a chain of emails that revealed payments from Richard's fund into offshore accounts linked to a consultant at Vivian's firm. Those transfers were small, layered, and legal on paper, but they left a paper trail. Paper, Damien liked to remind Gabriel, was a confession that taskmasters loved. Gabriel's most intimate move felt almost cruel in its moderation. He scheduled a pediatric checkup for the kids under the guise of routine health. Then, with a private lab and chain of custody protocols Damien ordered paternity swabs to be stored under lock seal. He was not ready to announce the results. He wanted to weaponize them at the exact moment their fingers hovered over his throat. If the test confirmed his worst suspicions, the timing and release would be surgical. If they didn't, if the children were his, then he would become their guardian and their shield. Either way, he needed facts before fury. Richard started to twitch. He called Camilla twice one night, voice clipped, asking why an investment had stalled. Vivian, when whispered to, tried to soothe him with talk of friends and business risk. Her practiced phrases as precise as a surgeon's sutures, but beneath her composure, anxiety bubbled. The auditor's emails had made her accountant avoid phone calls. Money, which once lubricated every door in their orbit, began to grind. The social circle murmured. A dinner invitation quietly rescinded. A donor who'd once pledged 5 figures stalled the check. Camilla's publicist floated a story to soften the rumor. Family restructuring, they called it. But the seeds of suspicion had already been planted in the kind of soil that grows fast and ugly. Whispers among other wives, nervous calls between trustees, curiosity from lenders. Gabriel continued to behave like the devoted husband. He read bedtime stories to Liam and Chloe with a softness that belied the battle unfolding like a map on his desk. He hugged Camilla in the kitchen once, kissed her temple, and asked about the gala as if business and betrayal were separate rooms in the same house. She answered with ease, oblivious to the audit report that slid into Vivian's inbox that afternoon, itemizing suspicious invoices and a consultant's phony deliverables. That evening, as the family laughed over pasta and TV, Gabriel sat in the shadow of their living room and let the scene breathe. He was making no threats, He made no mistakes. Each small legal motion, each anonymous tip, each frozen wire was a stitch in a net the family could not see. He had traded drama for patient ruin, slow, inevitable, and merciless. When the kids were finally tucked in, Gabriel placed his hand on the safe drawer and felt the weight of the documents inside. He had started the first 5 moves on a board he had learned to play since childhood. Moves born from a father's ruin and perfected under a mentor's quiet tutelage. The real reckoning would be louder, messier, legal, and public. But for now, the strategy was working. They were beginning to sense a loss they couldn't yet name, and panic, he knew, made people careless. The charity gala's chandeliers glittered like a constellation of accusations. Women in silk and men in tuxes floated through the ballroom, voices soft as cashmere and eyes sharper than knives. Camilla moved among them with the practiced grin of someone who had learned the currency of charm. Her mother glided beside her, plotting introductions and nodding at donors, as if marking names on a scorecard. Richard lingered near the stage, shaking hands and slipping business cards like a man who traded favors for power. Gabriel sat at a corner table, a guest of honor everyone assumed was the benefactor for the night. He smiled, polite and distant, his presence reassuring to cameras and gossip alike. He watched Camilla laugh as a benefactor recited a line she'd practiced. He watched Richard lean in close, whispering something about a new fund pitch. He watched his wife's fingers brush Richard's arm, the motion casual and too familiar. Across the room, a reporter's discreet text vibrated on Damien's phone. Damien glanced down, read, and didn't blink. He nudged Gabriel under the table, a small, almost private signal, and Gabriel's mouth tightened into something that did not entirely look like a smile. The first ripple began quietly. An article had dropped that afternoon on a financial blog known for forensic-style pieces. Possible irregularities in Steel Capital, traces of consultant payments to a prominent Boston marketing firm. The phrasing was careful. The post pointed readers toward a string of invoices that, on paper, made sense, but when threaded together, read like the short, sharp confession of embezzlement. The blog had no sources listed, only documents uploaded with partial redactions, account numbers, timestamps, and a consultant's name that flagged a subcontractor at Vivian Thorne & Co. The room hummed with curiosity. Richard, already on edge from a tremor of earlier SEC inquiries, felt the air go cold. He excused himself with a practiced smile, shoulders tight. Camilla watched him go, a crease forming between her brows. Gabriel did not move. He was a portrait of composed civility. He watched the scene like a man watching a house of cards breathe. Beneath the table lay the tools of collapse. Damien's quiet subpoenas, the auditor's email threads, the forensic spreadsheet that lit up like bruises on an X-ray. Each click of a reporter's device was a stitch in a suit of public shame he was tailoring for them. Vivian's phone buzzed. She put on a smile, but her fingers trembled as she read the forwarded blog. Her accountant called within the hour, voice small and clipped. That night, the boutique firm that had been the family's golden goose announced a temporary pause on client engagements. Anodyne words that the network read as a coffin lid being lowered. Richard's panic made him sloppy. He texted Camilla, short, urgent, clumsy, and in that message trail he made a single fatal error, a file attachment. Damien's team, watching from the shadows, captured it. The file contained a spreadsheet of wire transfers with timestamps matching consultant invoices. One line linked to a small offshore account with a name that matched a shell company Gabriel had quietly monitored for years. Evidence, once it feels the sun, tends to sprout teeth. Camilla lost more than composure. She lost the practiced rhythm of denial. That night she retreated to the powder room and stared at her reflection until the glass blurred. The idea of a private audit becoming public had been in Vivian's worst nightmares, but pragmatism had always silenced fear, until fear now came with receipts. When Camilla returned to the ballroom, a close friend asked if she'd heard the rumor. She forced a laugh and offered a measured denial. "We're looking into it, honestly." But her voice lacked the lithe confidence of before. Someone at another table whispered the blog's headline. The phrase "possible irregularities" moved through the room like a cold draft. Guess who had smiled at Camilla's dress the week before now scanned her for cracks? Outside, cameras clustered. A local news van idled at the curb, its lights like minor constellations drawing attention. An editor at a financial outlet called Richard's Fund for comment. The fund's spokesperson fumbled through platitudes. A board member at a donor foundation called Vivian privately and asked pointed questions. The little safety net the family had long used, favor and flattery, frayed in public view. Gabriel rose and moved through the crowd, his steps a lesson in measured power. He greeted strangers with graceful charm and accepted praise with an actor's humility. He watched Camilla approach him later, eyes glossy, voice forced into casual normalcy. "Gabe, the blog? This is terrible timing," she whispered. "People are talking." Her fingers hovered near his arm, seeking refuge. He placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, a touch that might have been consolation. "We'll handle it," he said softly, the words both promise and verdict. "Comfort the donors. I'll take care of the press." She looked at him, hope flickering, then faltering. For the first time, Camilla saw the distance in his eyes. An intelligent, clinical distance she had not known was possible. She thought she was watching a man who loved her navigate a crisis. What she did not see was a strategist choosing the exact moment to tighten a snare. By midnight, the rumor ballooned into trending conversation. Social feeds speculated. A gossip account posted a cropped photo of Richard leaving the gala with a hurried expression. An email chain from Vivian's firm had already been forwarded to a state investigator with a casual note. "Any thoughts?" The investigator's curiosity, professional, merciless, was all Damien needed to ignite formal inquiries. Back at home, the family sat in stunned silence for a few stunned minutes before frantic calls started. Vivian dialed her board, Richard tried explaining to investors, and Camilla scrolled through her phone like someone searching for a lifeline among flotsam. Gabriel, alone in his study later, poured a glass of whiskey and read the blog again. The choreography had begun. Public doubt, private panic, official interest. He had not yet shown his hand. He had only begun to cut loose the ropes they'd all assumed steady. The night outside hummed with ordinary life, while the family's fortune unraveled inside its own gilded walls. He thought of the kids asleep upstairs, their small breaths even and trusting. He thought of the trials ahead, the mediascape, the courtroom, the custody threads that would tug at their lives. He thought, too, of a line his father once spoke in a bitter kitchen. "When men steal dignity, reckonings are not loud. They are precise." Gabriel set the glass down, steady as a man who'd remade himself for this exact hour. The first public crack had opened, and with it, the beginning of the end for everyone who thought they had used him. Morning came with headlines instead of sunlight. Steel Capital faces internal audit over consultant scandal. Vivian Thorne and Coners under review for conflict of interest. By 8:18 a.m., every business blog and social page in Boston was already dissecting the story. Photos from the gala, Camilla in her emerald gown beside her husband, were now framed under captions dripping with speculation. Investors panicked, journalists called, and donors backed away. The Thorne family empire, built on charm and illusion, had begun to disintegrate before breakfast. Vivian's phone never stopped ringing. She answered one call after another, voice brittle but trying to maintain the poise of a woman who had survived 5 husbands and countless scandals. "It's just exaggerated press," she repeated, pacing her marble kitchen, clutching her robe tighter around her shoulders. "A misunderstanding. We'll fix it." Her assistant whispered from the doorway, "Ma'am, the auditors are requesting access to the firm's ledgers." Vivian froze. "Tell them to go through my accountant first." The assistant hesitated. "They said they already did." Camilla sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone with trembling fingers. The group chats that once overflowed with compliments and invitations had gone eerily silent. A few friends texted sympathetic lines. "Hang in there, babe. This will blow over." But beneath every message was curiosity, the same hunger she had once fed off when gossip destroyed others. Now she was the headline. Richard, on the other hand, was unraveling. In his downtown office, glass walls vibrated with tension. His investors demanded answers. Lawyers debated crisis statements, and analysts whispered about SEC probes. His assistant entered, pale, Sir, the bank just froze your Cayman account. Richard's eyes widened. What? On what grounds? They said it's under compliance review. They mentioned irregular transfers. He slammed his desk, veins pulsing along his neck. Who the hell filed that? But he already knew. There was only one man meticulous enough to dismantle an empire this silently. Meanwhile, in a high-rise suite overlooking the harbor, Gabriel Langford sipped his coffee and scrolled through the same news, his face unreadable. Damien sat across from him, tie loosened, reviewing a stack of signed documents. Phase 2 is in motion, he said. Bank freezes on all secondary accounts completed. We have enough evidence to file civil suits if needed. Gabriel nodded slowly. Not yet. Let them drown in speculation first. Panic makes people reveal their real crimes. He turned the page on a financial statement, Vivian's firm bleeding from within, Richard's fund under preliminary review, and Camilla's personal accounts quietly linked to both. Damien smirked faintly. You know, this isn't revenge anymore. This is art. Gabriel's voice was calm. Art has meaning. This has purpose. His thoughts drifted briefly to his children. They were with their tutor that morning, far from the chaos, unaware of the storm that had swallowed their mother's world. He'd received the DNA results the previous night. The envelope sat unopened on his desk, waiting for a heart brave enough to break again. He hadn't decided when or if to open it. By noon, the media frenzy had reached television. News anchors speculated about the mysterious benefactor who had funded both companies tied to the scandal. Financial experts discussed corporate sabotage and ownership restructuring. No one realized that the man sitting quietly in his corner office owned every string they were pulling apart. At home, Camilla tried calling Gabriel multiple times. He didn't answer. The silence unsettled her more than the gossip. Her mother had always warned her that silence from a man like Gabriel was dangerous. Don't let him feel betrayed, Vivian used to say. Men like him ruin quietly. Desperation crept into her tone when she called again. Babe, can we talk? I know things look bad right now, but it's all a misunderstanding. I didn't know Richard was... Her voice broke. Please just call me. Gabriel listened to the voicemail once, his face expressionless. Then he deleted it. Later that afternoon, he walked into the courthouse, flanked by Damien and two attorneys. The marble hallway echoed with the crisp sound of his footsteps. He filed a petition to dissolve all marital financial ties, citing conflict of interest and fraudulent concealment of assets. The clerk glanced at the documents, unaware that she was handling the legal start of a corporate bloodbath. By evening, the story had evolved again. Anonymous shareholder files court, motion against Thorn and Steel Holdings. The headlines speculated wildly, drawing lines between names they didn't yet understand. But the truth was simpler. Gabriel was not a victim suing for justice. He was a king reclaiming his throne. Back at the mansion, Camilla sat in the dark, her phone lighting up with call after call from Richard and her mother. She didn't answer either. Tears streaked down her face, but her pride wouldn't let her break. Not yet. The hum of distant thunder rolled through the night as if mocking her silence. Upstairs, her son's laughter echoed faintly from his room, unaware of the storm brewing below. Camilla looked toward the staircase and whispered, Gabe, please come home. But she knew he already had, just not in the way she imagined. Across the city, Gabriel stood by his penthouse window, watching lightning trace over the harbor. For years, he had been the man who fixed everything for everyone. Calm, generous, endlessly forgiving. That man was gone. What stood in his place was a strategist who had mastered patience and pain alike. The first courtroom battle was days away, but the outcome was already written in ink older than their marriage. Camilla would fight, Vivian would beg, and Richard would deny. But Gabriel Langford had already begun the quietest, cleanest execution Boston's elite would ever witness. He raised his glass slightly, watching the rain blur the city lights, and whispered to the reflection in the glass, Let's see who survives the truth. The courthouse buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing like lightning under marble pillars. Inside, the tension was surgical, sharp, cold, deliberate. Gabriel Langford sat at the plaintiff's table in a tailored charcoal suit, his expression serene, his silence heavier than any testimony that would follow. Across from him, Camilla adjusted her diamond bracelet nervously, sitting beside her mother and Richard Steele, who wore the strained smile of a man pretending confidence. They'd arrived believing they could charm the system the same way they charm boardrooms and donors. But this was Gabriel's world now, structured, documented, calculated. Judge Meredith Cole entered, her robe flowing with quiet authority. "Court is in session," she announced, tapping her pen once against the desk. The room stilled. The first witness called was an auditor from the state's financial division. Damian Cross, Gabriel's attorney, approached with the kind of composure only experienced grants. "Can you confirm the source of the irregular fund transfers linking Steele Capital and Vivian Thorne & Co.?" The witness opened a binder. "Yes, Your Honor. These payments were disguised as consulting fees, but routed through offshore accounts. Each transaction aligns with dates corresponding to personal purchases, luxury items, private vacations, and a real estate investment under Mrs. Camilla Langford's name." Gasps whispered through the courtroom. Camilla's head snapped toward Richard, panic flickering through the mask of her makeup. Vivian's knuckles whitened on her purse. Damian turned toward the defense table. "Mrs. Langford, do you deny authorizing these transfers?" Her voice quivered. "Those were business expenses. Richard handled them. I only—" "Under your digital signature," Damian interrupted smoothly, "and from your joint marital account. We have email authorizations time-stamped from your phone." Camilla's mouth fell open, her words dying halfway. Richard leaned forward, whispering urgently, "Stay calm. Don't let them—" "Mr. Steele," Damian said, turning sharply, "please don't coach the witness. You'll have your turn." Judge Cole gave a curt nod. "Sustained. Continue." Damian flipped another page. "Now, Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit 14, a copy of the prenuptial agreement Mrs. Langford and her family coerced my client into signing under false pretenses." The courtroom murmured again. Camilla's eyes widened. "Coerced? That's not true!" Damian's tone remained calm. "Mrs. Langford, isn't it correct that your mother and Mr. Steele were present when the document was presented, and that you concealed prior financial relationships with Mr. Steele?" Vivian rose slightly. "That's absurd. Sit down, Mrs. Thorne," the judge ordered firmly. "You'll have your chance to testify." Damian approached the bench. "Your Honor, this prenup was never properly notarized. The witness who signed as notary was, in fact, an employee of Mrs. Thorne's firm, making it invalid under state law." Judge Cole raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Damian stepped back and looked at Gabriel, giving a small nod. Gabriel rose, buttoning his jacket, and approached the stand with measured calm. "Your Honor," he began, his voice even, rich with quiet certainty. "I agreed to that prenup because I had nothing to lose. I was told it was protection, for her, for the family, but they didn't know the truth." The judge tilted her head slightly. "And what truth is that, Mr. Langford?" He reached into his folder and handed a document to the clerk. "The company they all work for, Thorne and Steele Holdings, was registered in 2016 under a private trust. That trust belongs to me." The silence that followed felt physical. Camilla blinked as if the words were in another language. Vivian stared, jaw slack. Richard froze completely. "I own the firm," Gabriel continued softly. "Every salary, every bonus, every project, paid from my ledger. I built the foundation they stand on. So when they forced me to sign that contract, they were already my employees." Judge Cole looked stunned, flipping through the documents. "These filings are verified?" Damian nodded. "All authenticated, Your Honor. Filed 3 years prior to the Marriage Amendment Act. This makes Mr. Langford the controlling shareholder of both corporations currently under investigation." The room erupted into whispers. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled notes like wildfire. Richard broke first. "You tricked us," he spat, standing abruptly. Gabriel's eyes met his, calm and sharp. "No, Richard, you tricked yourself. You thought you were seducing a man's wife. You were begging for your boss's mistress." Camilla's face drained of color. "Gabriel, please," she whispered. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He pulled one last envelope from his folder and placed it gently on the table. Before we conclude, Your Honor, I'd like to submit one final document. Damien handed it to the clerk. The judge read the label, paternity verification, and her expression hardened. Judge Cole cleared her throat. The DNA results confirm that the two children, Liam and Chloe Langford, are not biologically related to the plaintiff. Camilla gasped audibly. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Vivian covered her mouth, eyes wide in horror. Richard slumped, realization flooding his face. Gabriel's voice cut through the silence like glass. I raised them with love, Your Honor. I don't blame the children, but I will not carry another man's legacy under my name. Judge Cole leaned forward, voice solemn. Given the fraudulent contract, financial misconduct, and confirmed infidelity, this court grants full dissolution of marriage, transfers of corporate ownership to the plaintiff, and orders asset forfeiture from the defendants pending federal investigation. The gavel struck once, echoing through the hall like thunder. Camilla sobbed quietly, her tears smudging her makeup. Vivian's pearls snapped from her wrist, scattering across the floor like the remains of privilege. Richard stared at the ground, eyes hollow. Gabriel turned and walked out, unhurried, every step deliberate. Outside, reporters surged forward, microphones flashing. But he didn't stop. He didn't need to. The courtroom had already written the only headline that mattered. Husband destroys wife's empire in court, reveals he owned everything. And as he stepped into the sunlight, a quiet peace washed over him. Not happiness, but closure. He had kept his father's promise. The betrayal that once broke his family had finally found its reckoning. Rain fell steadily against the courthouse steps as the crowd thinned, washing away the last heat of chaos. The trial was over, but the echo of its judgment still rippled through Boston's elite like a storm that refused to leave. Reporters lingered under umbrellas, chasing the ghosts of sound bites that might explain how a man they'd once called lucky had outplayed an entire dynasty. Inside a black SUV parked at the curb, Gabriel Langford sat alone, watching droplets slide down the window. He could hear the faint murmurs of journalists arguing over headlines. He destroyed them. He owned it all along. Across the city, the Thorne estate looked more like a ruin than a home. Vivian sat at her dining table in a silk robe. Mascara smudged into faint shadows beneath her eyes. Her phone kept vibrating with calls from creditors, lawyers, and former clients demanding refunds. The firm's accounts were frozen, her license under review, her name already synonymous with fraud. She stared blankly at the chandelier above. Once her pride, now just another thing she might lose to auction. All this time, she whispered bitterly, we raised her to marry power, and she married the man who built the cage. Camilla hadn't left her bedroom in 2 days. The once sparkling influencer feeds she curated were now graveyards of deleted posts and sympathetic comments that only deepened the humiliation. She scrolled through articles about herself, every word another incision. Former socialite loses everything after court exposes secret affair. CEO's wife caught in scandal of her own making. Her reflection in the mirror frightened her. Tired, hollow, almost unrecognizable. She remembered how Gabriel used to look at her before all this, with patience, with warmth, and wondered how she had mistaken it for weakness. The world outside had always rewarded her beauty, her charm, her ability to bend affection into advantage. But love, she realized too late, had never been something she understood. Richard was in custody. The SEC and FBI had launched a joint investigation, freezing his accounts and seizing his firm's digital records. He'd been escorted from his office in handcuffs, 1,000 cameras capturing the fall of a man who once called himself untouchable. His lawyer had begged him to cooperate, but arrogance dies slowly. He'd chosen denial over confession, and now denial had turned into isolation. From his cell window, he could see the skyline he'd ruled. The same skyline now belonged to the man he'd betrayed. The only ones spared the headlines were the children. Gabriel had arranged for Liam and Chloe to stay temporarily with a trusted guardian until custody was settled. He hadn't told them the truth, just that their mother needed time to rest. When he visited that evening, Chloe ran into his arms, her small hands clutching his sleeve. "Daddy, are we going home soon?" she asked softly. He smiled gently, though his chest ached. Soon, sweetheart. Daddy just has to fix a few things first. Liam looked up at him, old enough to sense the storm, and whispered, "Did Mom do something bad?" Gabriel swallowed hard, brushing a hand over his son's hair. "No," he said quietly. "She just forgot what good looks like." Later that night, Gabriel stood on the terrace of his penthouse overlooking the harbor. The city shimmered below, indifferent, relentless. He thought of his father, of promises whispered in a broken kitchen decades ago. He had kept them all. He had rebuilt everything, turned kindness into strategy and pain into structure. But victory had no warmth. The silence after revenge is colder than betrayal ever was. Damien joined him briefly, holding a glass of bourbon. "It's over," he said. "They've lost everything. You've got the company, the assets, full custody, likely within the month. You've won." Gabriel stared out at the skyline, the rain now a soft mist over the water. "Winning and healing aren't the same thing." Damien nodded. "No, but sometimes one buys time for the other." When his friend left, Gabriel remained at the railing, the wind tugging at his coat. Somewhere across the harbor, the lights of the Thorne mansion flickered and went dark. It felt symbolic, the last lie extinguished. He closed his eyes briefly, then turned away from the view that had once defined his ambition. He didn't forgive her. Forgiveness was mercy, and mercy was what she'd used as a weapon. But as he walked back inside, the faint laughter of his children echoed in his memory. Their innocence, their trust, and that at least still meant something. He would raise them to be stronger, kinder, wiser, not perfect, just honest. Before midnight, Gabriel opened his laptop and drafted one final letter, not to Camilla, not to Vivian, not even to Richard. It was to his children for the future. When people betray you, don't chase revenge. Build something so strong that betrayal becomes irrelevant. And when they come for you, smile, because truth always keeps its receipts. He saved the file, closed the computer, and exhaled. The rain had stopped. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the city lights blinked like quiet applause. Muted, steady, final. Gabriel Langford turned off the lights, whispered a small prayer of gratitude to the silence that had rebuilt him, and walked into tomorrow.